Hello and welcome to Politics at Jack and Sam's Daily, the podcast that gives you everything you need to know about the day ahead in British politics in under 20 minutes.
My name is Jack Blanchard of Politico. With me, as always, is Sam Coates of Sky News. It is Tuesday, October the 8th, and it feels rather like day one of the rest of our lives for those of us covering Westminster, doesn't it, Sam? How are you doing today? You excited about the new look government and everything we've got in store?
It was very striking returning to Parliament. It was the end of recess as everyone sort of gathering back in Portcullis House and around Westminster yesterday. There is still a sense of churn on all sides. You've got a new team in number 10 trying to get a grip. We will be talking in a moment about how they're going to whittle down the Tory leadership contest. The sort of basic contours of politics are still establishing themselves. And again, we're in a sort of couple of days where the government isn't seizing the agenda. The biggest announcement the government's got for us today is the Transport Secretary, Louise Haigh, announcing a new investment deal for electric buses ahead of the International Investment Summit on Monday. Something I note doesn't appear to make the papers, doesn't appear to make the bulletins. So we're once again in this slight vacuum. But there's no time for this kind of churn and uncertainty. You know, Keir Starmer's about to launch himself on a whole load of trips. The budget's got to be finalised within the next 10 days. It's a bit late for everybody to be finding their feet.
Yeah, I want to stick up for bus announcements. Buses are actually, of course, massively important. And we remember having this conversation a few years ago when Jeremy Corbyn used to talk about buses and why buses really matter. However, as you say, if you want to seize back the news agenda, I'm not sure announcements on buses is likely to be the big headline grabbing thing you want. Maybe the taking back control of the government grid hasn't quite happened yet. Maybe these things take a few more days. After a Downing Street reshuffle. I think that's going to be our main thing to talk about today, Sam. Basically, Labour 2.0. We'll have the Cabinet meeting today for the first time with the new Chief of Staff in place and the other new appointments in place as well. And everything that stems from that is going to be the most interesting thing happening in Westminster this week and lots of weeks after that. But we must also talk about the Tories because one of the four remaining Tory leadership contenders is going to be knocked out of the leadership contest later. There's going to be voting this afternoon amongst Tory MPs and four will become three. So we better get into that. But let's start off with Labour because they're in power and they are clearly the most interesting story. One of Keir Starmer's allies was describing yesterday as day one, which is an interesting approach given we're 3 months into this government. But Sue Gray is gone. Morgan McSweeney is the new Chief of Staff and Keir Starmer will be gathering his top team for a cabinet meeting at 9:30 this morning. And I think we can safely assume Morgan McSweeney will be in the room and Sue Gray will very much not be in the room. And there's also a meeting of the Special Advisors, SPAD School, as we like to call it in Westminster, later on today. And again, very much expecting Morgan McSweeney to be leading that, trying to stamp his authority on this party. He is now very much running Downing Street. He's the most important person in government after the Prime Minister. And everyone and all the papers today are talking and speculating about what this means and how it's going to change the way Britain is being run.
And already you've got the interesting spectacle that Downing Street are having to dampen down some of the uncertainty caused by Sunday's top team reshuffle from number 10. Number 10 are this morning confirming that there is no truth to suggestions that Keir Starmer will basically put in motion a Morgan McSweeney authorised reshuffle after the spending review or later this year. There's a report in the Times that says Keir Starmer rules out a reshuffle. He says he's happy with his team. This comes after there were reports that Morgan will want a reshuffle after the budget or certainly by Christmas. But already number 10 are having to clamp down on that. What that report did yesterday is send a shiver through everybody who had thought that they were on Team Sue and worried that they were not necessarily on Team Morgan. An incredibly destabilising act that I think did cause a degree of insecurity amongst some of the cabinet teams that worried that they might be the target of an early reshuffle. So number 10 are telling others, there will be no such reshuffle. Keir Starmer is happy with his top team. We can come on to talk about whether or not we believe that and whether you can bank on that. But it strikes me that just a few hours later, exactly the same thing has happened again. There are a slew of reports, and also it's true from my conversations, about now there are questions about whether or not Morgan McSweeney is going to shake up the rest of Whitehall, other bits of Number 10. And that again has sent a shiver of insecurity through people that worry about their jobs, worry about what's happening. So if Sunday's change at the top in Number 10 was designed to bring calm, actually, because everyone spies knock-on effects from this, there are just loads of people who should be concentrating on the day job now worrying about their own futures in Whitehall.
Yeah, people fear change, don't they, in institutions? But change has come to Downing Street, and, you know, they can step there today. And yeah, we're getting the same briefings at Politico that there's definitely no reshuffle. Let's see where we are early next year if things haven't improved. Certainly, there's very fun briefings in The Guardian today about the radical change, quote unquote, that Morgan McSweeney wants to bring to the workings of Number 10. Quotes, nothing is off the table. The day-to-day machinery of government doesn't work properly. And a wonderful line about McSweeney wanting a, quote, data-led approach to government. Now, who does all this remind you of, Sam, when you hear about someone desperate to shake up the Whitehall machine, radical change, a data-led approach to Number 10? Have we found ourselves the new Dominic Cummings in Number 10 that we've all been waiting for the past few years? Who can say? But it's certainly striking talk. And for those of us that watch Whitehall very closely, it's pretty interesting to see where this one goes. And as you say, it's certainly unsettling lots of people who felt they were close to Sue Gray inside government, both cabinet ministers but also officials, now wondering where this sudden power shift leads them. Just listen to this, Sam, something out of Playbook this morning, just to give you an indication of where Labour are at now. We've had some polling shared with us by the More in Common group. Labour's poll lead is now down to 1 point. 1 point. Their latest survey of 2,000 people has Labour on 29% and the Tories on 28%, with Reform on 19, Libs on 11, Greens on 7. It's only been 95 days since Labour won the biggest landslide election any of us can remember, and here we are just 3 months on. They are 1 point ahead of the Tories in the polls. Now, it's obviously only one poll, and well, who cares about polling when we're years away from election? But still, it gives you an indication of just how far the stock has fallen and just how poor the start to government for Keir Starmer has been, and it gives you an indication of why he felt he had to bring the changes in Downing Street just so quickly into his new administration.
The real business of government this week, the bit of business that's taking place behind the scenes, is no less troubled. That is, they've got about a week to 10 days to nail down the budget on October the 30th and the spending review. And of course, the spending review settles the budgets for every single department for the next financial year, so from next April. And the more I talk to people, the more it is quite clear that process feels quite troubled, and there is briefing on both sides. There is briefing that the Treasury are being too tough, asking for too much, requiring too many cuts to capital projects, which kind of investment projects, the kind of things that bring about growth. The Treasury are even coming for projects that might actually turn a profit in time. They're known in the Whitehall jargon as value for money projects, simply because the Treasury wants short-term savings. And that's causing some cabinet teams to have their heads in their hands and look to Downing Street for a bit of political support. So they need help from the new team in Number 10. But on the other hand, I'm told that some cabinet ministers are basically playing silly buggers, submitting completely unrealistic demands for money in the hope that they can sort of stake out negotiating positions and get something slightly better, but are living in la la land. And this is a big problem against the backdrop of they continue to insist, very bad economic picture, where several of the manifesto promises about how they are going to raise money are proving to be causing them huge pain. I'm told that in the budget, the promises of how they're going to make money, things like changes to the way that it's called carried interest is taxed, so that's making money off big private equity deals, that may not end up being judged by the sort of economic watchdog, the Office of Budget Responsibility, as something that makes money. Some of the pension tax changes may not make money. And you've got the spectacle of Rachel Reeves having to potentially tiptoe back from revenue-raising promises in the manifesto, and that is causing a great deal of angst in government. All of this is not helped by their insecurity and the uncertainty that the events of the last few days have caused.
Two more warning signs, Sam, for that budget on October the 30th. One, referred to the front page of the Financial Times today, reporting that the UK's long-term borrowing costs have climbed sharply, fuelled by investor concerns about Labour's government, which means that essentially Rachel Reeves is walking a tightrope if she's going to carry on with borrowing and investment plans without triggering some sort of sell-off. That is exactly not what you want to be reading when you're the Chancellor, just as you're trying to figure out how much can you realistically afford to borrow without triggering some sort of market panic. These are precisely the wrong timing for those headlines, just as you say the budget is being finalised this week and next. And another thing that was sort of slipped out by the government last night via a written statement, the Lower Thames crossing. This is essentially a new road crossing under the Thames, and this is one of these long-running infrastructure sagas that Britain loves to indulge itself in. This has been going on for years, waiting for a planning decision on whether this new tunnel under the Thames is going to be built. That decision had been expected. There was a deadline looming. It has now been delayed for another 8 months, and Lou Hay, the Transport Secretary, said the delay is to allow more time for the application to be considered, including taking into account decisions made as part of the spending review. i.e., we don't know if we've got enough money to let this happen anymore. These are exactly the sort of things that will give people jitters as they wonder exactly where Rachel Reeves' head is at going into the budget on October the 30th.
Yeah, and we're waiting for announcements about everything from small nuclear reactors to other infrastructure projects in the spending review. There is just a sense of everything being on pause and not a sense that we know what the priorities are inside government. Is it growth? Is it fiscal responsibility? Is it funding public services like the NHS better because that's the thing that could get them re-elected? We just don't quite have clarity on where they're heading, or are they just going to end up salami slicing a whole load of stuff and marginally improving a whole load of stuff and nobody actually feeling better in a substantial way in any area of their lives? That's the danger that cabinet ministers say they worry about, to me. Should we hop on to the Tories?
I think we should. We were so excited about the Downing Street reshuffle yesterday that the Tories only got 30 seconds, which was a bit unfair for them. Today is a big day for the Conservative Party. We have 4 candidates going into the contest this morning, as we know, and by the end of the day, we will have 3. Sam, do you want to just remind us where the Tory leadership voting was at last time around? Because just to remind listeners who aren't following this as breathlessly as me and Sam, and I suspect there's a few of them out there, essentially we're still at the MP voting of the contest, where the Tory MPs vote on their fellow MPs, and the one who finishes last drops out of the contest with each round of voting until we get down to 2. Just remind us where we were at last time.
So last time, Robert Jenrick was the front runner on 33 votes, Kemi Badenoch on 28, James Cleverly on 21, Chum Tugendhat on 21, and Mel Stride was eliminated on 16. So the 2 big questions today are: where do the votes that previously went to Mel Stride end up being allocated today? And so it's extremely significant that overnight Mel Stride came out in favour of the kind of dark horse in this contest, James Cleverly. And if you can hear background noise, that's because breakfast is taking place in our house. Meanwhile, I think the big thing for me today is just looking at how the number of MP backers of James Cleverly changes. Last week's Tory conference seemed to be a lot about James Cleverly using the moment in the hall in front of activists to sort of grab the initiative and get a bit of a sense of momentum, just as our polling suggested that he was in touching distance of figures like Robert Jenrick if he gets through to the final 2. Can James Cleverly overtake Kemi Badenoch? Does he get a surge? How has Tory conference changed MPs' opinions of this race? It's all about James Cleverly's number today.
Yeah, I entirely agree. It's felt for the past week or so like all the momentum is with Cleverly. We all just collectively decided he'd had a good conference. As you say, there was that polling showing that he was very much within touching distance of Robert Jenrick if it was a head-to-head between the two, which seems like a not unlikely outcome. And now this extra boost for Cleverly last night that Mel Stride, the last candidate to drop out, has backed him. The question is, do the other 15 supporters of Mel Stride also decide now to back James Cleverly and sort of follow their leader? That seems to me, and from speaking to people in other camps, unlikely. They're not sort of devout cult-like supporters of Mel Stride who will just do whatever Mel tells them to do. Those votes will probably fan out reasonably between the different candidates, but there is a basic expectation that Mel Stride was seen as more on the One Nation moderate wing of the Tories. His supporters therefore were also that, and therefore they're more likely to back either James Cleverly or Tom Tugendhat in the contest today rather than Jenrick or Badenoch. It feels difficult for Tom Tugendhat today. You have to say he does not have the same sense of momentum. He got the same number of votes as Cleverly last time round. We're all expecting Cleverly to get plenty more today. It seems most likely, if you were a betting man, are you a betting man, Sam? I don't think you are you? I am also not a betting man. But were I, then my money would be on Tom Tugendhat dropping out today. And then the big question on Wednesday would be, has Cleverly got enough to overtake Kemi Badenoch and put her out of the contest as well? And then we would have that Cleverly Jenrick final contest that you were talking about last week.
And even now you can see a path to Cleverly and a path to Badenoch and a path to Jenrick. We've got a little bit of polling from YouGov. We just asked them to, all Tory members that were surveyed, to enter what they thought the most important qualities of the next Conservative leader should be. Coming top of the list with 22% integrity and honesty. Second, honouring Conservative values on 15%, and 9% said strong leadership. Right down at 2% was winning the election. So integrity and honesty comes top. I am told at the same time, particularly if it's a sort of generic Cleverly contest, expect it to get quite nasty if that's the case. I think what will happen soon after we get to the final two will be, the leadership teams basically trying to dig up dirt on the others. And I'm told to expect it to get quite spicy the moment we hit the final two. So I don't know whether that means that leadership camps are preparing dossiers on their rivals. You might remember in the distant past, there was meant to be a system of yellow cards to stop briefing and counter briefing that were going to be enforced by the kind of ruling 1922 committee. That has never happened. The closest that they've ever had this leadership contest ever come to issuing a yellow card was shortly after the first round of voting. There was a sort of a nasty piece, as someone would say, by Tim Shipman in the Sunday Times. There was lots of briefing and counter-briefing, and the leadership campaigns were all gathered in a room by Tory grandees and told to stop it. It feels like those strictures have gone completely out of the window now. So brace for the unpleasantness to go up a gear after Wednesday.
And speaking as someone who loves watching unpleasantness go up a gear in these contests, I'm very much look forward to that. Those of you who are desperately hanging on for the Tory leadership contest today should be told that the hustings for MPs is at 11 a.m. The voting starts at 1:30 p.m. and the results will be in at 3:30. Set your watches. We will find out then which of the latest Tory leadership candidates is due to drop out. And I suspect we'll be talking more about the Tories on the podcast tomorrow, Sam, because the next round of voting will be immediately upon us on Wednesday. Those three remaining contenders will become two, and we will then know which pair will be duking it out to the death for the next few weeks for the votes of Tory members to become the leader of the opposition and maybe the leader of the most popular political party in the country. Sam, could you believe by that point? It's certainly the direction of travel where we're at the moment.
One person involved in the leadership contest said to me yesterday, even though Labour have given us a run for our money, we have to prove we can put on the better psychodrama. Truly, nothing has changed. Should we wrap it up there and leave you to your day ahead? And we'll be back at the same time tomorrow morning.
Thanks very much for listening. See you tomorrow.